The Sermon on the Mount, Part 5, Treasure, Trust, and the Kingdom. Today we'll be looking at Matthew 6:19 through 34. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great will be that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of much more value than they? Can you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about your clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow, they do not labor or spin. Yet not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and gone tomorrow, thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows what you need. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Money is one of the most perplexing and emotionally loaded topics in Christian history. Across the centuries, followers of Jesus have wrestled with wealth and poverty, sometimes leading to vastly different conclusions. Some, like the Desert Fathers, Francis of Assisi, and various monastic movements, took vows of poverty, renouncing possessions entirely. Others, such as the modern proponents of the prosperity gospel, view material wealth as a sign of God's blessing. Still others, like Abraham Kuyper in the Netherlands, envisioned forms of Christian socialism, while philanthropic capitalists like Andrew Carnegie believed Christian values demanded the responsible and generous use of wealth. Jesus' teachings in Matthew 6:19 through 34 speaks directly to this ongoing tension. His words are both deeply practical and profoundly spiritual. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And you cannot serve God and mammon. These are not just warnings. They are invitations to live with unshakable trust in God, rather than having anxiety about possessions or daily needs. Yet they raise difficult questions. How are we supposed to give up everything? How do we provide for ourselves and others without becoming a slave to money? Is it possible to be both faithful and financially secure? Before we turn to our panel, we should note that Second Temple Judaism, much like Christianity today, was not monolithic in its views on wealth. The law and the prophets emphasized both God's care for the poor and the responsibility of the wealthy to use their resources justly. Wealth was not inherently evil, but greed and exploitation were consistently condemned. Practices such as tithing, gleaning, debt forgiveness, and almsgiving express this ethic of compassion and trust in God's provision. Now we invite our panel of thinkers to reflect on these questions. Here are the guiding questions for our panel. What tension does this passage express between material security and spiritual trust? How might Christians faithfully navigate the economic world while honoring Jesus' teaching? What does this passage say about discipleship and leadership in a world shaped by wealth and anxiety. Panel reflections on Matthew 6:19 through 34. You cannot serve God and money. John Wesley. Tension between wealth and trust. Wesley taught that wealth was not inherently evil, but the love of it was spiritually dangerous. He warned that riches have a tendency to steal the heart away from God. Faithful navigation. Wesley's famous principle was earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. He encouraged Methodists to engage in economic life, but to see themselves as stewards, not owners, and to give sacrificially to the poor. Discipleship and leadership. He believed Christian leaders must model simplicity, generosity, and trust in God, or else they risk becoming entangled in the very system Jesus warned about. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Tensions between wealth and trust. Bonhoeffer saw this passage as a call to radical trust and simplicity, especially in the cost of discipleship. Possessions, he believed, become rivals to God's lordship. Faithful navigation. For Bonhoeffer, discipleship meant living in voluntary detachment from wealth, not necessarily giving up everything or giving it all away, but refusing to let possessions dictate one's security or identity. Discipleship and leadership. Bonhoeffer insisted that the church must resist conforming to the economic anxieties of this world. Leaders must not be people who worry like pagans, but who embody trust in God's provision. Amy Jill Levine, on tension between wealth and trust. Levine would note that Jewish tradition does not view wealth as being inherently wrong, but emphasizes its ethical use to care for the poor, to support the temple, and to honor God. On faithful navigation, she would point out that Jesus stands in the tradition of the Jewish prophets who critiqued economic injustice. This passage is not about asceticism per se, but about putting trust in the right place. On discipleship and leadership, Levine might warn that over-spiritualizing this passage could lead us to ignore real economic issues. She would emphasize justice, equality, and generosity as marks of faithful leadership. N.T. Wright, on tensions between wealth and trust. Wright sees this as a part of Jesus' kingdom announcement. God is taking charge, and therefore worry and hoarding have no place in the new creation. Faithful navigation. He urges Christians to see money not as evil, but as a tool to be used for kingdom purposes. Our job is not to abandon the world, but to redeem our relationship with it. Discipleship and leadership. Christian leaders, Wright says, should be people of calm, confident generosity, showing that their treasure truly is in heaven and that God's future reshapes their present. John Howard Yoder. Tension between wealth and trust. Yoder would read this passage as a radical social critique. Jesus is not just offering personal advice, but calling his followers out of systems of economic idolatry. Faithful navigation. He would urge believers to form alternative economic communities, churches that resist consumerism and practice mutual support, hospitality, and generosity. Discipleship and leadership. Leaders must reenact mammon, or rather, let me rephrase that. Leaders must reject mammon as a rival lord. Faithful leadership involves economic resistance, being visibly different from the world and how we handle wealth. Dean Kingsbury, tensions between wealth and trust. Kingsbury would interpret this passage through the lens of Matthew's narrative structure, seeing it as a call to single-hearted discipleship, in contrast to double-mindedness, that is, serving two masters. On Faithful Navigation, he might emphasize that Matthew is urging the community to prioritize the kingdom above economic worries and anxieties. The point is not to abandon work, but to orientate all of life toward God. On discipleship and leadership, Kingsbury would say that leaders in Matthew's gospel are called to embody this undivided loyalty, living with clarity and purpose that reflects heavenly values over earthly gain. Rudolf Bultmann. Tensions between wealth and trust. Bultmann would see this as an existential call. To trust in money is an inauthentic existence, while to trust in God is the path to genuine freedom. On Faithful Navigation, he would stress personal decision and inward transformation. The issue is not money itself, but the anxiety that reveals where our true trust lies. Discipleship and leadership. For Bultmann, Christian leadership is about helping others awaken to this choice. Leaders should point people toward authentic trust in God, not worldly securities. Richard Bauckham. Tensions between wealth and trust. Richard Bauckham might see this passage as a critique of economic idolatry, especially in light of Revelation and its warning against Babylon's wealth and pride. Faithful Navigation. He would advocate a return to simplicity and sustainability grounded in a biblical vision of stewardship and justice. Christians must oppose systems that exploit and accumulate. 3. Discipleship and leadership. Leaders are called to prophetic witness. Not to mimic the wealth-driven culture, the church must demonstrate a new economic imagination shaped by the gospel. Final takeaway for the group. Jesus' words challenge every generation. Where is your treasure? What kingdom does your wallet serve? This passage doesn't condemn money, but it does demand we wrestle with it and its implications. Whether rich or poor, secure or anxious, Jesus invites his followers to live free from fear, full of faith, and generous with all that we have.